inspired from the Ghanaian marketplace. It's very chaotic, but also has like a sense of movement, looking around, like up, down, like there's so much going on at the same time, has like a sense of direction. I think that was what really inspired this installation to start with, and it has like elements and compositions of things in the marketplaces and like references of my current space and my space back in Ghana. With my first installation from the back, I was thinking of how I could encapsulate space, like two spaces, and how could I actually do that using material as my means of communication. And materials that have like different properties. So with metal and clay actually shrinks in a kiln, and the metal actually enlarges before it shrinks when it cools down. The metal that I was using were from metals I was finding in the spaces here, and using the clay as a representation of my background, which is Ghana, which is pretty much very common when you look at the ground. So I'm thinking of how these materials could merge or like conform in a space where I have no control. And then the kiln was like the perfect space for me to do that, and have the kiln decide the final outcome. And then we're also using like metal fences. Like fences has to do with like things that create barriers. Like, you use metal fence as barriers, and then using clay also as a means of something that's very fragile. And how do I penetrate these barriers using that same material? So metal fences and clay itself. The fences has to do with also like navigating through spaces, like the blockades and the things you have to go through. Sometimes has to do with like movements from one space, like getting checked in before you go to another country, like TSA. There's all of those metal cages, like has like references to all of that. So how do I navigate through those barriers? When I came to the US in my initial stages, I didn't know summer was a big deal because in Ghana, every day is summer. So I came and I think during the summer I realized people go to the beach a lot, almost like a traditional idea for summer. There is something specific for almost every family. And I find it very striking that the umbrella became a very symbolic object for me. Seeing umbrellas in a space where people relax and just have fun. And I think for me, when I think of umbrellas in Ghana, I think of where work begins. How the beginning of relaxation for people in one space is also the beginning of work in another space. The umbrellas again in the marketplace, when people set up their umbrellas, because it's too shiny and it's too hot. You need an umbrella to work. So that was also an inspiration for this piece, which has traces beyond the waves. So what are the traces beyond the waves? At the beach, the traces that are beyond the waves is someone actually beginning work, or labor or something. So leisure is almost equal to labor in another space. I think this was one of my first pieces that I made when I was in grad school in the US. And when I came, I was struck with the difference in space, language. I mean, I knew I know how to speak English, but I didn't know I would never be misunderstood speaking the same English, right? I think in all of those, accumulation of all of the things that I'm experiencing influence the piece Trust Your Gut. So I was thinking of how I could create a sculpture piece that will become like a self-portrait where me, the individual, you can actually see who I am, but I have a reference to something that's almost evident in everybody. Like what makes me come on to you, what makes me come on to him. So I was thinking of the body, the organs in the body, like the intestines. And in the intestines, I think the large intestines is the only organic body that actually assimilates food into your bloodstream. So without that, you have no nutrients, or you can actually grow as a person. I think this is the most literal, the most representational piece among all my installations. installation. I was thinking of how, the roots, or like, the roots assimilate and draw from like the ground and produce the fruits we eat, right? So how do I create that? And I was trying to use a different medium, the spray foam, to capture like that, flowy look, but something also like kind of aesthetically pleasing. This installation in itself was, I think, my biggest installation yet. I think it has to do with movement and a sense of community. And I think this piece also inspired by one artist I was looking at. He actually had people use clay and have them recreate kind of like the same objects over and over. And you can tell that each object had like this uniqueness. So you could see like the evidence of like their work and their hands in each piece. And I was inspired by that idea, and I was trying to create a body of work that, like an installation that has a reference to evidence of different people coming together. For me also, I think I wanted to have people be able to interact with and see from different views. It has like the sense of movement, like endless from one point to the other. It's like, that investigative, that sense of curiosity, I think was my main goal for this installation. What you actually see is an individual, like a body of people carrying objects on their head. So each piece in itself has like something it's carrying. So it's like a face with a medal carrying clay. And the upside down piece, I think the upside down piece has to do a lot of like tension and balance and like reorientation, and encounter with like kind of like destructive force. And I think in a way for this piece, I wanted people to just be able to question why something is reoriented. Why do we always see things in a certain way or need to see things in a certain way? I think for me, I had to do it trying to recreate like constructs like that we actually exist in. So how do you redefine the construct you exist in? So you can do that by changing the orientation of something you always see, right? And I think the notion of it being in like this state of falling or like no balance, for me was the most like intriguing part of like the piece. For me personally, I navigate like new spaces, like you're not sure, am I doing the right thing? It has to do it like that back and forth. The idea of the strings was just to be like this useless material, supporting the piece, but it's not playing any role in the support. Strings are supposed to be this material that you use to support something in place, but the strings are playing literally no role in the piece in itself, and the piece is still trying to hang on into the space in which it exists in. So I think that was the goal for this piece, and I think that was also very successful. In a way, I was trying to create spaces where you can see within the piece itself, so you can see what's holding the body. So you can see like that metal pieces kind of like trying to patch what's left of the piece, and you can have like the option to investigate what's it. I like when my audience are able to like investigate, and I think this body of work and this installation was something that will get people very curious and maybe question if possible, or at least be open to new possibilities also. And I think that's what this show and this installation is pretty much about.